Welcome to Anime Recaps. In this video, we will explain the record of Crests War. This anime focuses on Siluca, a young mage who scorns the feuding lords for abandoning their people, and Theo, a wandering knight and crest holder trying to liberate his hometown from its tyrant lord. What is the story of their adventure? Let's find out in the record of Crests War. The record of Crests War begins in the magic city of Harem, which is located on the Atlantic continent. In that city, the demon lord appeared at the wedding of Marion and Alexis, the children of the two faction leaders. The marriage that was meant to unite the two ruling families was destroyed, and both leaders died at the hands of the demon lord. The incident resulted in two factions, Fantasia Union and Factory Alliance, clashing again. War ensued throughout the Atlantic continent. A few days after the incident, Siluca, a mage who had just graduated from the academy, and her maid, Irvin, went to another city to make a contract with Viller, a noble lord from the Arctic region. Siluca actually didn't want to enter into a contract with that noble. Rumor has it that Viller is a lecherous noble who likes to seduce young women. But on the other hand, having a contract with a master was an absolute must for a magician like her. On the way, Siluca and Irvin were both blocked by the troops sent by the Alliance faction because they knew Viller was on the Union side. The Factory Alliance did not make Viller contracts with magicians. As a magician, Siluca could defend herself and fight them easily, but a wandering swordsman suddenly appeared to protect her. Unexpectedly, the man who introduced himself as Theo had a crest or magic symbol, indicating that he was worthy of becoming a lord. But he didn't side with Alliance Factory or Fantasia Union, he only fought to save Siluca. After the Alliance troops were defeated, Siluca helped Theo raise his title to knight level. Because of that, he could enter into a contract with a magician, and Siluca herself no longer cared about her mission after she met Theo. She chose Theo as her master and cancelled the contract with Viller unilaterally. Although in the end, her actions dragged Theo into a dispute between the Fantasia Union and the Alliance Factory. Because of that, Siluca, Theo, and Irvin decided to head over to where the Alliance official had previously sent troops to attack them. Theo and his allies managed to corner the official and take his title and castle in a short time. Now Theo got a new title and became lord of the territory previously owned by the Alliance. To gain recognition from other lords, the mage in the castle suggested Theo negotiate with the Alliance, but Siluca didn't agree because she wanted Theo to join the Union side. But after Theo declared himself a member of the Union, it didn't take long for his position as a new lord to be threatened by the Alliance, who then began planning to attack Theo's territory. The scene then switches to Siluca and Irvin preparing a plan to deal with the enemy who will invade. Siluca realized Theo was short of troops, and because of that she used summoning magic to send a message to her sister named Aishella. After that, Siluca went to Theo and explained why she didn't want to enter into a contract with one of the lords of Arctic. Or rather, she didn't want to make a contract with anyone because all rulers always wanted titles and only thought about power. That is the source of endless wars and conspiracies. According to Siluca, only Theo was different from these rulers, so she chose to serve him. Elsewhere, a lord of the Alliance named Lassic David prepares his troops to attack Theo's territory. Then the next day, he moved to Theo's castle and was ready to attack. Aishella, who was Theo's reinforcements, had also arrived there. She is a very powerful fighter and user of the Dark Seal. Thus, her arrival made Siluca believe that Theo would win this battle. Theo and David's camp finally fought. David mobilized his troops to one point, while the people led by Theo spread to various regions. Siluca blocks the enemy's movement with her magical abilities, but she has difficulty facing another mage, Dortus Morno. Elsewhere, Aishella faces a swarm of enemies alone. The fight made her feel happy because she could release her brutal side. Not only her, but Irvin also greatly contributed to the war. He fought one-on-one with the strongest martial artist on the enemy side. Meanwhile, Theo, who was originally guarding the back row, decided to join the fight. He goes to help Siluca and manages to take the powerful wizard who served David hostage. Feeling his army had been defeated, David surrendered and decided to join under the leadership of Theo. The absolute victory made Theo's crest level rise to Baron, and David was now officially Theo's subordinate. The scene then shifts to Arctic's territory, where Viller, who is supposed to be Siluca's master, begins to investigate the movements of Theo and his allies. In the end, the handsome long-haired lord was disappointed that Siluca didn't live up to his expectations. Back at the castle, Theo and his gang celebrate their victory by feasting. David also felt very excited after joining Theo because he believed Theo could easily expand his territory. But David's assumption was later opposed by Siluca, who said that Theo's goal was not to expand his territory but to save his homeland, Sistina, and become a leader there. To realize this grand plan, several members of Theo have been sent to negotiate for the territory's independence, which is now under Theo's control. Not long after, suddenly, there was news of the emergence of monsters in the city area. Theo and his allies immediately came to the scene and fought against the monsters there. The next day, Morno gave word that negotiations had failed. King Sivas, one of the lords of the Factory Alliance faction, did not recognize the independence of Theo's territory. He wanted them to settle their affairs through war. Theo didn't have much time to deal with King Sivas' army. In terms of troops, it was clear that he was outnumbered, so this battle would be very difficult for Theo and his allies. Therefore, he had to write letters to other unattached lords and invite them to become his allies. Help from outside is the main hope so that they can win. Because previously Theo and the others had saved the city from chaos, a group of citizens volunteered to offer their help. At first Theo refused because he did not want to risk their lives, but after seeing their sincerity, he finally agreed and then showed his group's flag to unite them. The next day the war began. Theo and his allies managed to keep up with the opponent's fighting power despite being outnumbered. Not to mention the presence of allies in a war which further increases their chances of victory. In the end, Theo's group won the battle, leaving many of Sivas' troops now under his control. The scene then shifts to the head mage's residence in Valdrand. There, Siluca, who Theo sent, asked the chief mage to join the Fantasia Union faction, but instead of accepting the invitation, the head mage asked Theo to give up his territory, his throne, and leave Sivas' territory as soon as possible. He even threatened to deploy Valdrand's elite troops in full force if Theo didn't obey his orders. After deliberations, Theo and his allies agreed not to give up their territory. As a result, a war with Valdrand was unavoidable. To increase reinforcements in the upcoming war, Siluca visited the Viller residence, only to receive a refusal in the end. Having broken his contract with Viller, she was not allowed to see him. Before the war started, Theo gathered all his members to develop a plan. From their information, Valdrand would attack King Sivas' army, causing Theo's group to be outnumbered again. When the war started, the surprise attacks carried out by Theo's group were not very effective. The opponent's strong defense and attack even caused Ishela to be seriously injured. However, the situation is different inside the castle, where Theo lures the opposing forces and manages to encircle them. Elsewhere, David with his army also lures King Sivas' army into a narrow area in the mountains. There, David bravely counterattacked and defeated King Sivas and his army. The defeat of King Sivas opened the opportunity for Theo's group to launch a truce. Theo and his allies then regrouped to arrange their next plan, and Siluca predicted that the opposing side would demote Theo's title to the lowest ruling caste as a condition of withdrawing from the battle. To outsmart this possibility, Theo decides to give his position to David. That way, he could come back at any time to make it easier for him to achieve his goals. However, while negotiating with Valdrand's side, the head mage instead asked for Theo's life as a condition for a truce. Therefore, Theo and his allies could not help but have to fight another war against Valdrand. In the second battle, the troops from Arduk, led by Viller, unexpectedly came to Theo's aid. Their arrival was greeted with joy and disappointment because Viller came with one condition. He wanted to make Siluca his wizard. But besides that, he would also make Theo the king of Sivas if they won the war. However, Theo did not want to accept the title. He prefers to be under Viller and hand over his position to David. Even so, he wanted to retain his title as a knight to maintain a contract with Siluca. After all, despite Theo's status as Viller's subordinate, he didn't want to give up his dream immediately. One day he will return to be the leader in his native place, Sistina. Meanwhile, David finally accepts Theo's given position. He promised to stay loyal to Theo no matter what. The scene then revolves around an eerie forest, where there has been an incident involving the conflict between the Wolf Clan and the Vampire King. But the real cause was not the Vampire King, but the black magicians who served him. Hearing this, Viller ordered Theo and Siluca to go to their allies in the Forest of Eternal Darkness, which was the domain of the vampires. Arriving there, Theo and Siluca received word from the Wolf Clan that the Wolf Queen and her 2 children were being held hostage by a black magician in a secret place. Theo and Siluca then came to the castle of the Vampire King, ready to fight. But to his surprise, the Vampire King doesn't like fighting, a stark contrast to his strong and sinister appearance. The Vampire King left his own castle without a single fight. After that, Theo and Siluca explored the castle until they reached the dungeon. It turned out that it was there that the Wolf Queen and her 2 children were detained and tortured by a black magician. The battle broke out, and Theo and Siluca had enough trouble against black magicians who could cast various types of magic, including summoning magic. If it wasn't for his Crests' power, perhaps Theo would have lost to the black magician's attack. Fortunately, the Wolf Queen and her 2 children later helped Theo in this critical situation. Together, they finally managed to corner the black magician, where she decided to run away. After the Vampire King and his servants left the Forest of Eternal Darkness, Viller appointed Theo as the new lord of the forest. The residents began to accept Theo because he had saved the Wolf Queen and her 2 daughters. They also promised to serve him faithfully. A few days later in Villar's castle, Siluca learns magic from several senior magicians who serve Viller. But at the same time, Margaret, who is Villar's most loyal magician, looks disappointed because Viller will cancel her contract right on her 25th birthday. Knowing this, Siluca persuaded Viller to keep Margaret's contract, but Viller still refused on the grounds that it was a law he had set since becoming a noble, that a female witch who was 25 years old had her contract cancelled. Margaret's birthday arrived. The party was attended by lords from various regions of Ardak, which made the atmosphere in the castle so lively. Viller then dances with Margaret, which Theo is interested in trying. He then asked Siluca to be his partner, but because they were still amateurs, Theo and Siluca looked nervous. They even tripped a few times. The next day, Viller gathered his subordinates to discuss plans for a meeting of the rulers. In the end, they decided to go with a large army to conquer the Forbes and Clovis territories. Siluca advises Theo to go to Baron Ladvin's territory, while the Forbes territory raid will be led by Mirza Kuchas, Viller's ally from the Dartania region of Ardak. Long story short, Mirza arrived in the Forbes area and then went to the palace where the leader lived there. He went alone without bringing any troops. Even so, Mirza turned out to be a very strong swordsman. He was able to finish off the troops in the castle and managed to seize the crest belonging to the ruler of Forbes. After slaughtering all the top brass of Forbes, he waited for the next step that the success of Theo's group would determine. Meanwhile, Theo and Siluca had arrived at Baron Ladvin's territory. But instead of declaring war, Theo decided to negotiate with Ladvin to persuade him to join Fantasia Union. Ladvin initially refused. He only agreed after Theo explained the current war situation, where the safety of the Ladvin residents would be more secure if they joined the Union. Negotiations were successful, and now Ladvin officially became Theo's subordinate and declared his loyalty in front of the entire population. In a different place, David and his troops won the war. Viller and his subordinates' plans to take down Forbes and Clovis were realized without any significant resistance. The victory was warmly welcomed by the leader of Fantasia Union, Alexis Daus, a bride-to-be who failed to marry due to the arrival of the Demon Lord at the beginning of the story. That night at a party, Theo meets with Alexis. Alexis really liked Theo's personality and wanted to talk to him again at another opportunity. After that, Viller brought Theo together with the lord from his hometown, Sistina, whose name was Federico Rossini. Federico doesn't seem to like Theo because he goes by the name Cornero, even though he doesn't come from a noble family. Federico even said that Cornero wasn't a name a weakling like Theo could use. But Theo did not return the insult because he was sure that he would return to Sistina and become lord there one day. After the party, Theo and Siluca rested, but it wasn't long before Alexis came to visit them to tell a story. From the story, they knew that since his marriage failed, he had difficulty establishing a relationship with his future wife, Marine Crests, who was from the Factory Alliance faction. After chatting, Alexis was escorted by Theo and Siluca to his horse carriage, but at the same time, a group of troops appeared to attack them. After investigation, it turns out that Federico sent the assassination squad to finish off Theo. Unfortunately for him, because Theo was with Alexis when the assassins struck. Angered by Federico's actions, Alexis finally wanted to kick Federico from Fantasia Union. His decision was intertwined with Theo's wishes. If Federico is eliminated, it will open up more opportunities for Theo to move and seize Sistina. Marine then heard the news of the attack on Alexis. She has received all the love letters sent by Alexis, but she can't reply to them. She is traumatized by the murder on her wedding day and feels that Alexis and herself were not meant to be together. Sometime later, and at the meeting of the lords of the Fantasia Union faction, it was decided that Federico would be removed from the list of allies. There was also a debate about Viller's move to conquer the Alliance's territory at the meeting. Viller was considered reckless for moving alone without the approval of the Union officials. This resulted in the tension between the Alliance and the Union increasing. But Viller reasoned that all of this was done to ward off the rulers who were starting to run wild. And the most appropriate way to overcome that is to usurp their title and throne. On the other hand, Marine and the entire Alliance faction planned to counterattack and invade Viller's territory. One of the Ardak region lords who learned of this immediately went to Viller for help. However, Viller decided not to get involved, leading Siluca and Mirza to question the decision. According to Siluca, that would only pave the way for the Alliance side to destroy Ardak's territory. But the stubborn Viller seems difficult to compromise. He still doesn't want to go to war. After failing to persuade Viller to go to war, Theo and Siluca head to Theo's domain. They had time to save a small child from a monster attack in the middle of the trip. But when they reached the border, it was raining heavily, forcing them to take shelter under tree roots and close together to keep warm. This is where it appears that Theo and Siluca have a special relationship. They are open to each other about their feelings. Siluca really enjoyed traveling with Theo, while Theo honestly said he was afraid that Siluca would become Viller's follower after everything was over. The scene concludes with Theo's confession of love to Siluca. Then the scene shifts to the Arctic region, where Mirza helps the Allied forces against the Alliance forces. Again, Mirza shows his prowess in fighting, which makes the opponent think hard to conquer him. The Witch Alliance then found a way to fight Arduk's army. They used the natural poison near the fort and then spread it. After all of Arduk's troops were rendered incapacitated by the poison gas, Marine and her army began to attack and succeeded in conquering the fort. Then she ordered her subordinates to prepare a meeting with Mirza. It turned out that she wanted to invite him to become her ally and turned against Arduk. From the start, Mirza wanted to serve the ruler who dreamed of uniting the continents, and that dream radiated from Marine, but he did not immediately accept her offer for granted. He wants her to be his partner as a condition of their alliance. Marine said that she could not be Mirza's wife in response to these conditions, but she was willing to give up her virginity so that Mirza would become her ally. A few days later, news broke that King D'Artagnan had died and the throne was passed on to his son, Mirza Kuchas. The news reached Marine, who thought it was a sign that Mirza kept his promise to side with the Alliance faction. With Mirza joining, it made Marine and her troops continue their assault throughout Arduk's territory. After being relentlessly attacked by the Alliance forces, Viller finally planned to counterattack with the help of his vassal lords. He orders David, who is now king of Sevis and Forbes, to invade Orzel's territory. Theo, the Lord of the Dark Forest, was also summoned to enter the battle. In the Kilhai's territory, King Solon led the war against the Alliance. While preparing his troops before fighting for Arduk, he confidently told them that they would not die. But the reality is quite the opposite. The Alliance troops killed King Solon and all his troops. Meanwhile, Mirza brought all his troops from D'Artagnan across the ocean to Arduk. Viller had heard the news of Mirza's defection, and Margaret also told him that Mirza had the heart to kill his own father to join the opposing faction. Viller himself assumed that he only needed to defeat Mirza to win the war, because currently Mirza was the most formidable warrior the Alliance had. In addition, Viller believes the D'Artagnan region will return to its side as before if he manages to get rid of Mirza. Mirza's army finally managed to regroup with the Alliance troops in the evening. In the distance came a fleet of Marine Allied ships moving towards Viller Castle. Unexpectedly, the Alliance was assisted by the Nordic army. According to the myth, the Nordic people lived in a remote region and had great fighting abilities. In Jalusia, which was the Union headquarters, Alexis and several lords discussed the Alliance's invasion of Arduk and how to proceed. Among the lords, some wanted to reclaim Arduk and expel the Alliance troops, but not a few thought that Viller and his followers' fault had sparked the war. Meanwhile, Viller himself had now realized that his territory was under siege by the enemy, and he decided to put up a final fight. Before dealing with opposing troops, Viller had left a message for Theo and Siluca to one of his magicians. He acknowledged the truth of Siluca's words. If Viller had chosen to fight initially, this kind of disaster would not have occurred to him. Then came the moment when Marine and her army came to Viller's unicorn castle. A cornered Viller embarks on a suicide mission with his loyal magician, Margaret. They go berserk and unleash their full strength. Margaret controls fire magic, while Viller fights with a sword. But in the end, Viller was defeated by Marine. Before dying, Viller gave his crest to Marine, while Marine gave Mirza the throne and Viller's territory. Even though Mirza had taken over the Unicorn Castle, the remaining Viller troops couldn't accept it. They chose to continue fighting Mirza because they did not want to submit to a traitor like him. Viller's death moved the lords under his leadership to make a pact. Everyone who attended the treaty gathered to fight for the legacy of the ruler of Arduk. After the agreement was ratified, they then chose a new leader. Initially, Selj, Viller's younger brother, was chosen to fill the position. But because Selj felt he was not worthy, they appointed David as the leader because he had succeeded in conquering the territory in the war. But David felt bad about accepting the appointment because he had a promise of allegiance to serve Theo Cornero. Therefore, he suggested that Theo be their leader. But again, Theo politely declined the offer because he knew most of the members trusted David more than he did. To maintain his reputation, Theo insisted that he would prove to all that he was worthy of being served by David one day. Meanwhile, the war was still going on, and Mirza and his troops continued their attack on Arduk. But that's when David and his cavalry came to defend the territory. For a moment, Mirza and his troops could face David head-on, but the momentum then vanished after David's reinforcements arrived, forcing Mirza and his troops to retreat. Elsewhere, Marion has a meeting with Theo. She actually didn't want to fight Theo, but somehow she had to take over his territory. Likewise, Theo didn't want to fight Marion, but the situation forced him not to give up. In the end, Marion and Theo decided to go to war. But not long after, Marion suddenly withdrew her troops. One of the Alliance troops elsewhere had been defeated, and they asked Marine to help bring in additional troops. With Marine's retreat, the war situation changed. For Theo, it was the perfect opportunity for him to dominate Sistina.